Welcome to Seedy Talks. This is our first in-person lecture since February 2020. It's very exciting because we had, more than 2 very difficult years, and after a long period of isolation due to the pandemic, we are here. And I know that if not for all of us, most of us have still been grieving due to a loss of a loved one or someone we love, lost folks dear to their hearts. And I'm sorry for your loss. At this event, our lectures oftentimes discuss issues related to food justice, and we cannot divorce food justice from reproductive justice, overall health justice, and racial justice is the core component of food justice issues. And of course, as we grieve for our losses, we also need to be conscious of and think about how this pandemic affected communities of color unequally. If you want to understand the historic and current context of the ways in which these communities suffer from injustices related to this country's health system, as I always do, I recommend a book every session, and I highly recommend Harriet Washington's Medical Appetite. So, this is our 10th lecture in this series. It's kind of amazing that we have come, thus far. But that's because we always have amazing guest lecturers and a community, regional community, and all the regions, throughout the regions across the country. And one observation I make about our guest speakers is the hope, dedication, and hard work they demonstrate to overcome the challenges and difficulties their communities face. We need to celebrate these communities and all of their work while we'll also celebrate our gathering here today. My mom is here with us today. She traveled from Turkey to visit us. And I have to say this, when I lived in Michigan and Florida in the past, she also visited us. And it always fascinates me how her visits are so incredibly independent from the place we live. Because she brings here my homeland with her. I mean, that I think speaks a lot to my immigrant experience. And when she's in the house becomes an insulated capsule, and the entire context outside the house, dissolves, it disappears, and it kind of becomes irrelevant. Because of that, regardless of where we live, that place becomes my childhood home when she's with us. So we need to celebrate our mothers who has taken care of us, who have been worried about us since the beginning of the pandemic, and who are also still with us and who are not with us anymore. We also need to celebrate Black scientist, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, the key scientist behind the COVID vaccination in this country. And we need to celebrate the children of Turkish immigrants in Germany, Dr. Uğur Şahin and Özlem Türeci, the key scientists behind another vaccine developed far from here. And of course, we are here today to celebrate Black farmers as well. Founded by Black Farmers Federation of Southern Cooperatives and North Bolivar County Farm Cooperative, among others, made significant contributions to civil rights movement. In 2014, Black farmers of McDowell County, West Virginia, founded McDowell County Farms to give Black and brown communities, as well as all other community members who have been transitioning out of mining and timber industry, to give them access to fresh food. And I don't see what Black farmers in McDowell County and our guest speaker here today, Jason Tartt, did with his mentor and Black farmer Sylvester Edwards. Fortunately, he's not with us anymore, but back in time in 2014 was any different than what Black farmers in other regions did over the decades. And that is taking care of communities. And if you want to understand the historical context of Black farmers' struggle and work in this country, there's also another great book, Dr. Monica White's Freedom Farms. Before we are going to watch a short clip. Before we do that, I'll introduce our guest speaker. Then we'll move on to the lecture. Jason B. Tartt Sr. is originally from the Walls Creek community in McDowell County, West Virginia, and a graduate of Bluefield High School in Bluefield, West Virginia. In 2010, he returned to West Virginia with his family in tow after a military and Department of Defense contracting career. He has spent the better part of 10 years on working to understand and create awareness and education around the viability of agribusinesses in the region. Tartt co-founded Economic Development Greater East, EDGE, and several other organizations to identify regional economic drivers and develop models around food and agriculture, clean energy, tourism, and community health. He has developed training and experiential learning programs for budding food producers and future business owners in McDowell County. Tartt is an entrepreneur, farmer, business owner, and an ambassador of change who is passionate about exploring the opportunities Appalachia offers to empower our communities and build sustainable businesses for future generations. One of his main goals for McDowell County and Southern West Virginia is to demonstrate Black excellence through creative agriculture and entrepreneurial projects. Tartt recently appeared on CNN in an episode of Kamau Bell's United Shades of America. So we'll play that clip now, and then we'll move on to the lecture.
In Ghana, they have the same Sankofa, which means return to your roots. It's just kind of going back and looking at what the ancestors were up to and trying to build it in a sustainable way.
Jason Tartt is an educator, an activist, a veteran, a farmer, and a pioneer of sorts. In 2014, he did what a lot of Black folks from here don't do. He returned home to establish McDowell County Farms.
Today, come on over today.
While the farm is owned and operated by Jason, it's clear as soon as you get here that 8-year-old AY runs the place.
Now this is the eggplant. And you'll see it's coming out slowly.
We'll be spending time with him later. The farm produces up to 100 tons of produce a year, but its higher purpose is to reestablish the roots of Black agriculture in the region. Through Jason's mentorship program, he trains farmers of all races in agriculture and entrepreneurship. Me, I'm here because I look good. Apiary couture, anybody?
There we go. Hello, Mr. Tyler. There we go.
But don't get distracted by my good looks. Bees are a big deal here.
I'm ready for work.
Bees.
Ready to check in.
Manny Ferguson is the resident beekeeper and AY's dad. I'm telling you, this kid never stops. While AY cuts the grass, he's put me in charge of killing mites in the beehive. And I'm on it, AY. I'm on it.
We found out recently this area has more capacity to produce honey than the entire state.
Really? What makes it that good?
Trees,
Okay. Just the amount of trees or the type of trees?
both.
See, it takes all you got. Yeah, there we go. You can see the honey in there, actually.
Right there. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
They're still working on it.
they're still working on it. Pop one of these out and see how they living in there.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, everybody. These are lazy.
Yeah.
These ain't doing nothing. Lazy bees. These bees are like me in high school. I'm working on it.
To be fair to the bees, this ain't really honey season. But when the spring and summer come, they produce some of the best honey in West Virginia. I know because I brought some home. But besides taste, what makes this honey really special is that it is a way for people to make money off these mountains without coal.
All right, brother, come on. Here's the end product. Appalachia's best.
Okay.
We're very proud of it. Mountain Gold. There used to be a large Black population here in Appalachia, and we all left and ran to the. I was guilty of it myself. The leaders here, they only speak one language, that's code.
That's called a model economy. And when this model economy collapsed, it left this place, McDowell County, with the dubious distinction of having the biggest percentage population loss of any county in the United States over the last 50 years.
All these problems, you know, could have been avoided. Let's talk about the after. What do we do after COVID? And that never happened.
Yeah.
You know, so here we are now, trying to put that together. I think agribusiness has a great potential. Honey alone could produce a lot of economic growth for this region.
I think a lot of people, when they think of why is this black man in rural West Virginia doing agriculture, you know, they don't see it as an act of resistance. This is the protest, and this is everyday work, and this is planting a seed for a vision of cooperative economics, you know, and how can, you know, we share this land and develop this land.
Absolutely.
Talk about the Ghana connection. How does that come about?
2019, they had the year of return.
Yeah.
I went to Ghana and had my DNA tested just to find out that my ancestors were Ghanaian. Whoa. So I was at the crib, you know what I mean? To see the spirit of the Ghanaian people, how hard they work, they never quit. And here we are in Appalachia facing a lot of similar challenges. It really motivated me. So a lot of what we've done here in West Virginia is a mirror of what's taking place in Ghana. My ancestors, grandparents, they were planting fruit trees on these hillsides, raising hogs, chickens, you know, sustaining themselves for years. So bringing back that sense of pride in you know, being a producer or creator yourself. Ultimately, leave a legacy of you know, you see AY running around, loving what he's doing, understanding what's going on. He understands value add at his age and how to get the dollars.
Sell me honey.
Absolutely.
Look at the pretty thing. Watch it flop.
Do you like doing this work, AY?
Yes,
Why do you like it?
because it's fun. Now what we do, just cop the thing.
Okay, that's Blade.
Careful.
Whoa, all right, you know what you're doing. You know you're not in an urban environment when a kid has unfettered access to the axe. Open access, and he just keeps going to the axe. So how often do you go in there and do this work?
Every day.
Every day. Anyway, what you have is called a job. Do you know that's a job? You have a job? Do you like it?
Don't you?
If somebody asks you, what's your goal? What's your goal here?
My goal is Black excellence. We are very capable. We've shown it time and time again. And when given the opportunity, when left to ourselves to do our thing, that's the result. It's always been the result. So give us the opportunity to do what we do. It doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter where we are. We will turn nothing into gold. Here, I think the opportunity is through agriculture. I want these young African Americans that come through my program to understand what you have been taught and what you have been shown about your own community, about your own abilities is not true. And bringing folks through here to make them believe again, there's no greater feeling.
So is one day office gonna be yours?
It is right now.
Oh, God. That's a massive bang, you know what I'm saying? Throughout this episode, we've talked about how there are fewer and fewer Black folks left in Appalachia. But let me be clear, there are still Black folks in Appalachia. We filmed with more than we could fit in the episode. And look at them. These people are home. We need to keep telling their stories. We need to acknowledge them in this place. We need to make sure that just like Ghana, Sierra Leone, Harlem, and Atlanta, that this place is known as one of the places that Black folks come from. Somebody get my harmonica. I feel a song coming on.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Tartt. I am so honored to be here today. Thank you all for coming. A sincere thank you to Mehmet for making this come to pass. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. As the P's mentioned, I am from McDowell County, West Virginia. Very proud of that. I left here many years ago into the military simply because at that point in my life, that was the only option that I thought I had. I come from a poor Black community right in McDowell County. And during those times, you know, all the Black people were kind of concentrated into these small coal camp communities. So I grew up in a very segregated environment. When I was at home, when I went to school, I was in a more of an integrated situation. But one thing that I noticed was that the experience that the white community was having was very different than the experience that I was having. I've had dear friends come to this university, white friends, but that was not the reality for the folks in the community that I come from. So the military, I felt at the time, was the only option that I had. And most of the people from my community took that route. We all joined the military because that was the only option that we felt that we had. Fast forward to today, you know, I came here about 10 years ago. Well, now it's about 12 years ago, not thinking about agriculture at all. I was in the corporate world. I was the vice president for a small DoD contracting organization. And at the time, I was managing about 11 states with about 400 to 500 employees, depending on what we were doing. And the folks that I worked with, the things that we were doing were very, kind of in a classified environment. So we were down on the Mexican border doing things that most citizens have no idea of what's going on. Working with the US government, it was a great experience. Having that access and exposure to the corporate world really kind of exposed me to how things operate in the United States. So after a while, I moved my mom to Colorado, which is where I was. My mom became ill, so we had to figure out what to do next. So the best option for us was to get her out of the altitude, given the condition that she had. So we brought her back home. Upon arriving back home, coming out of the DoD world, obviously there are no DoD facilities in this part of the country. So it's kind of like, well, what do we do now? What am I going to do now? I started to do a little substitute teaching. You know, folks were saying, well, you got a degree and go and teach kids. I learned right away that that's not my lane. You know, teaching small children wasn't for me, especially coming out of the environment that I came out of, very structured, you know, zero margin for error. But what really discouraged me about not wanting to teach, because I love kids, was the system itself. One day I went to a school. I was sitting in the corner and this lady comes to the classroom and she's pushing this cart. She got all these little cups on the cart. She says, well, I said, well, what's this about? She says, well, we have a health and nutrition program. So we bring the kids healthy snacks at certain parts of the day. I said, okay. So she goes around and places a cup of fruit cocktail out of a can on each student's desk. And I'm sitting there in the corner thinking to myself, so your idea of healthy food for these kids is a can of high fructose corn syrup, basically. And then you look at how these children were being approached from an educational standpoint, and it was just, you know, a train wreck, honestly. So I couldn't see myself as being a part of that system. I love children. I have children of my own. I had a granddaughter born just this morning, so I'm a little bit amped up right now. So legacy is very important to me. Legacy is kind of what motivates me in life now, not only for my own family, but for the Black community, for the Appalachian community. I'm very proud of being from West Virginia and all the places I've been throughout the world. Everywhere I go, there are these stigmas attached to being from West Virginia. First of all, I didn't know there were Black people in West Virginia. I didn't know you people wore shoes. You know, there's the hillbilly stigma. So now I realize that a lot of the struggles and the stigmas that have been attached to the Black community have now found its way into mainstream. Everyone, especially here in Appalachia, you see in the Black community, I think, let's talk about health. Let's talk about feeding hungry people. Let's talk about some of the struggles that the Black community have endured forever, especially in the inner cities of the United States. And you're looking at a situation where you concentrate all these people into one area, low-income housing. It always boggled my mind, why do they call these areas projects? And what is this, some kind of experiment? You know, so when I was a child, I was about 8 years old, and I asked my dad, because again, we lived in these coal camps. We didn't have access to the coal mining jobs like other communities did. So my question to my dad was, why us? Here I am 8 or 9 years old, and I see the difference in what's going on in my community. And I look at the white community, and I go to school, I'm wearing clothes from my cousin or my brother's hand-me-downs or whatever have you. There are events at school, and I already know, don't even ask my mom if she can give me money to go to this event, because I knew that we didn't have the money for it. So my whole mind was really shaped when I was very young. And I told myself when I got the opportunity that I was going to make a difference. This can't continue. I'm tired of my mother struggling. You know, I'm tired of seeing the people in my community struggle. So I left. I got experience, I got education, I went into the corporate world, and I learned a tremendous amount. I was bitter. I went into the military. I had great experiences in the military. I was a military policeman in the military. So I thought, you know, we all think you go into the military and your life is going to change. You're not going to experience racism and all these inequities that we deal with in the military. So I went into the military police corps just to find out that only 2% of the military police corps was Black. They sent me to Fort McClellan, Alabama, which is in Anniston, Alabama. And the first thing they tell me is, if you're a person of color, do not go off this installation unless you're with other people. So I'm thinking, here we go again. What in the world is going on? I got into the DOD world. My first job out of the military was in corrections. And that's kind of normal. Most guys go in the military, especially in law enforcement, you either end up a cop or you end up in the DOD world or something related to law enforcement. So I went into corrections. That job only lasted me a year, because when I went into this, I didn't really have a real perception of what mass incarceration looked like and the effect that it was having on my community, until I went and I worked in a prison and I saw what was going on. The recidivism rates were through the roof. I was in North Carolina, and I would see the racism even in the prison system and how these men were being treated. So that job only lasted a year. I moved back to Colorado and got into the DOD. That is a middle-aged, white, male-dominated industry. So one of the first questions I asked was, how long does it take me to promote? You know, I want to be branch manager. How long is that going to take? Oh, it's going to take you about 7 years. I was promoted to a field grade executive in 7 years. So I became an area vice president faster than anyone in the company's history at that point, because of great mentoring and really having a knack for what I was doing. I really love the industry. I love the people that I work with. I really made an effort to reach out to the Black community, to bring people with me, guys that I was in the military with, who otherwise would not have gotten some of these opportunities. And to this day, I'm very proud of the fact that a lot of the folks that work with me are still doing very well now, have gone on to do very good things. But as I said, my mother became ill. I was really in burnout mode anyway, because when you're in this industry and you're dealing with such large amounts of money, and you still have to deal with the racism, you still have to prove, you have to go above and beyond what everyone else is doing just to prove that you belong, to prove that you have the mental capacity to do what other people are capable of doing. And as a Black man in America, even in the military, it was the same way. I remember a guy in the military, a white male, said Black soldiers could not do land navigation. We didn't have the mental capacity to do land navigation. So these things hurt. You know, these things mess with your mind. It's like, what am I doing? They're deploying me to places. And I realized even in the military that what is happening here is the exploitation of poor people. Regardless of your race, when you go into the military, it's the exploitation of poor people. So you take poor people from communities in America, you feed us this line that there's an imaginary enemy, and you know how the US government is famous for presenting to the communities that we have this invisible enemy out here. There's a threat to the United States. I was always looking for that threat. Then I get deployed to what was the Yugoslavia. It's now known as Bosnia-Herzegovina in the mid-90s. One of the most impactful experiences of my life, because at that time I realized that this is all smoke and mirrors. There's nothing serious about what's going on here other than politics. And you're using poor people to go into other poor countries and do things to other poor people. And I couldn't see myself in a career doing that. Go into the DOD, and then you realize what's going on there. Talking about weapons of mass destruction, talking about, you know, creating things that just do harm to people. The United States wrote the book on it. So by the time I got to about year 12 or 13, I realized that this is a strain. Mentally, it's a strain. I didn't believe in what I was doing anymore. The only thing that was keeping me there were the people that I was working with. That's who I believed in. Family is priority for me, so I moved back to West Virginia. What are you gonna do? Substitute, that's not gonna work. My mom was into gardening, so we decided to go out and start a small garden. So my whole introduction into agriculture, really, I owe to my mother. Let's go plant a garden. Okay, great. So we go out, we start planting a garden. A few weeks into that, I'm reading the newspaper article, and they've got a program called Veterans to Agriculture with the West Virginia Department of Agriculture. So I drive through a blizzard to Logan, West Virginia, get some information. Okay, great. So I go into agriculture, not knowing a thing about producing food. So I'm in learning mode. 2 months into it, I get a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Sylvester Edwards. Sky was my mentor, a veteran. He passed away a couple of years ago. Now I think he would be around 75 years old. He was a former Marine. So I grew up around a lot of elderly people, and that's who he reminded me of, because when I did something stupid, he would let me know right away. And he would make you feel that big when you did things. But at the end of the day, it was very beneficial for me because he understood agriculture in a way that you don't hear from other people. He had a lot of Native American roots, and a lot of what he did came from that perspective. Dirt, for example, or soil for some people, depending on who you talk to. He educated me on that. There's a lot going on in this, what you call dirt, that I wasn't aware of. So if you're into agriculture, you're not really into growing food or raising livestock, you're into soil management. Because without healthy soil, you don't have food. I don't care whether it's livestock or fruits or vegetables, it's not gonna happen. So he gave me a lot of great perspective on how to approach agriculture and how to be friendly to our environment. West Virginia at the time, you know, getting engaged with the West Virginia Department of Agriculture was an experience for me because initially we were trying to go along with what they were telling us was going to happen. So at one point they said, well, we're going to grow potatoes. And me and my ignorant self, I didn't know that it didn't make sense to grow potatoes in this part of the country. So, okay, let's grow potatoes. It's me. And he's looking at me like, oh, so go out. You want to compete with I don't know, you can't do that. So the more we got into this, the more I started to realize that these people that are leading us don't have a clue as to what they're talking about. But why is this? Why are these people, it's either incompetence or intentional, right? So why are they telling us to do these things that don't make sense in this part of the country? And then you start to look at the connection with coal mining. And there are people that would just as soon see McDowell County turn into one big coal mine. They don't care. Their idea is let's clean the place out, get rid of all the people, and let's make this money. Obviously, coal mining has been in decline for a very long time. So what they weren't anticipating is that this thing's going to go away. It's quickly dwindling to nothing. So there was no real plan to do anything after coal mining. And that was intentional as well. I was a little naive when I went into all of this. You give people the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, what has happened to McDowell County and many other counties throughout this region, it was all by design. As stubborn as I am, I still thought that there was room for agriculture here. One of the things that Sylvester said was, this is not farming in Appalachia anyway. Farming in Appalachia means using the hillsides. It's what's here. So I started to look at what's actually here, what's going on. What is nature telling us that we ought to be doing? So then I start to reflect back on my childhood and the things that were going on then. And there were fruit trees on hillsides. There were people raising livestock. There were a lot of things going on. So we didn't have to reinvent anything. All we had to do was Sankofa, as I said in the piece. Look back, look to see what our ancestors have been doing all along. Look at the things that were going on here prior to coal mining, and there are your answers. But again, when you talk to the powers that be, they're not trying to hear that. So in moving this thing forward, we really started to engage with people. There were people asking us to do farmers markets. West Virginia University was on the ground. We started off with something called kids coupons. And with the kids coupons, they actually paid farmers to put up farmers markets at all the elementary schools. And then they would pay for the kids to do their shopping. I thought that was a great program. But the credibility that comes with this type of work is paramount. You have to engage these people, especially in communities like McDowell County. You have to be credible. You have to be serious about what's going on. And some of the things that the university was doing didn't make sense. You're telling these young children that you should live a healthy lifestyle, but yet you're not putting people that represent a healthy lifestyle in front of these folks. You're just getting grant funding and going through the motions and saying, yeah, we showed up, we did it, check the box, and then we're out of here. Meanwhile, the folks in these communities are losing more and more trust in organizations that are coming into these areas, making these promises. Well, we want a case study, we want a survey, we want to do a feasibility study. Oh, here's what's wrong with you. Have a nice day. So none of this was solutions or results based. And this community feels deserted. There are many communities around the state that just simply feel deserted. And I got to the point to where when you look at West Virginia University, you see the flags, you see the ball caps, you see the t-shirts, but that's all related to sports. Unfortunately, the community is kind of asleep at the wheel. The folks in the community aren't looking at these things and really saying, wait a minute, there are things that need to change. And the folks that are in leadership in these communities simply don't want change. When you have county commissioners that are owners of coal mines, that kind of tells a story. And that's what's been going on in places like McDowell County for many, many years. A lot of what I began to understand, and you see parallels between what I grew up seeing happening in the Black community to the Black community now you're seeing it spill over into other communities. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that started to really resonate with me because, you know, there are a lot of folks who claim to be good people, claim to be here to support those in need, but during the Black struggle, and it continues to this day, there was nobody to come, there was no help. There was no one that was going to come and say, here, let me help you. It never came. And Black people have always been very resourceful, very resilient people. Guess what? Folks from Appalachia have always been very resourceful, very resilient people as well. There are stigmas attached to Black people. There are also stigmas attached to people from Appalachia. You know, the old saying, we're a bunch of hillbillies here. My experience with these so-called hillbillies are they're some of the most resilient, resourceful, intelligent people that you will ever encounter. When you talk about having a relationship with the land, they understand. They understand how to bring the most out of the land here without harming the land. You talk about some of the industries related to agriculture, medicinals. Those so-called hillbillies were into medicinals many years ago. So we're just now kind of catching up to where they were already, where they've already been. But yet we're stigmatizing these people as less than, and you know, less intelligent or whatever have you. So a lot of these things started to resonate with me. So Sky and I got together with a group of other people, and we formed an organization called EDGE, Economic Development Greater East. And in forming this organization, we didn't want to go about this thing the way that we were seeing other people going about these things, right? So we're just going in, getting grant money and taking off. So we understood that in order for us to do this the right way, we have to have the right people as a part of this organization. So one of the founders is Dr. Crystal Cook Marshall. She's out of Virginia Tech, and she was doing research in coalfield research and really looking into how did this happen here in the coalfield. Dr. Ellen Darden was the professor of rural social work out of Concord University. Miss Amelia Bandy is a health, what's your title?
Health educator.
Health educator. So what we were trying to do was pull people together that had certain expertise that fit what was going on in this community, as opposed to just getting a group of people together and saying, let's go get some grant money and act like we're fixing something here. And when you sit down and you talk to these folks, and at this point, again, I'm still trying to learn how to grow a tomato, you know, much less understand what's going on. But one thing that kept being mentioned to me, though, over and over again, I kept hearing food desert, food desert, food desert. I didn't know what a food desert was, but when you say food desert, my first thought was, okay, these people don't have access to food. So here I am, let's grow some food, solve the problem. Then you sit down with Amelia and Dr. Darden, and it's like, well, food deserts go way beyond just having lack of access to food. It's, what do you think is sparking some of the problems with this opioid issue? You know, the health statistics, when I met Miss Bandy, to see how poorly our community was health-wise was mind-blowing. And then you start hearing about small children, 8 years old, full-blown diabetes. And then you look back at the Black community's experience again. Who leads the country in every poor health statistic in the country? The Black community. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, all of these things were really prevalent in the Black community. You look at McDowell County and the same thing is happening all over again. The only difference is these are not just Black children. So this thing has come full circle. We really have gone to work at really trying to expose these things, but bring education and awareness around what's causing them. And you start to ask yourself the question, how are these things happening? How are these drugs getting into these communities? And these are not, I'm not talking about street drugs. I'm talking about pharmaceutical drugs. You go and you talk to the county commissioners. You go, we've talked to the commissioner of agriculture here. We went to Charleston to meet with the commissioner of agriculture and his deputy back in 2017, I believe. And once Sky and I started to figure out, we can't continue to go at this thing from a traditional ag. It's not going to work because that's just not who we are. So we started to really focus on mountain farming, mountain agriculture, looking back to see what our ancestors were doing here and applying those practices to what we were doing. And we knew that that would work. So we talked to the commissioner, and these people just ignored us. It was amazing to see the response that we got from these folks. So they have no interest in agriculture prospering in West Virginia. It's just not an interest to them. And even to this day, they're still talking about homesteading 101 classes online. So economic development has never been a focus either. Coal mining is it. That's all that they think about. That's all they're going to think about. So we took it upon ourselves to start putting the work in, putting things together to actually demonstrate to this community that this is what this is supposed to look like. The only problem was the community has bought into coal mining is all that we are. It's all that they know. So when you go into places like McDowell County and you start talking about things other than coal mining, you have problems. Nobody wants to hear it. When the elections come around these days, even still, as bad as the coal mines have declined, when the politicians come 2022, we're bringing coal back, you're going to have most of the folks in these communities still voting for these folks. And you ask these folks, do you understand that just because they're talking about bringing coal back, do you think that's going to translate to jobs? Because now coal mining is largely mechanized. What used to take 100 people to do now takes maybe 8 or 9 people. You've got a team of engineers, and then you've got these huge machines that do all the work that men and women, of course, used to do. And the folks in these communities, you would think they don't know this. So I think they've just become indoctrinated so badly that there's no other language that they hear. And again, we're talking about taking advantage of poor people. We've perfected the ability to take advantage of poor people. When we started economic development, it was really centered around agriculture. But as we've gone on, we've realized that there's a lot more to be had here in Appalachia than just agriculture. You look at the water that we have, we've got more water here than we've got anything. I was telling some folks earlier that I went to a local store, I bought a bottle of water, and it was from Knoxville, Tennessee. And I just shook my head. I'm thinking, you mean to tell me that we're buying bottled water from Tennessee when we've got fresh spring water running off of mountains everywhere around here? What are we doing? So we've talked to people about the various ways, what are the economic drivers in Appalachia, specifically places like McDowell County, West Virginia. We've talked about renewable clean energy. We've talked about agriculture, and there are many areas within agriculture, agribusiness that, opportunities exist around. We're just not taking advantage of these things. There are several industries that have room here to do very well. You saw the honey in the video. McDowell County and Mingo County have the potential to produce more honey than the entire state of West Virginia. So we're talking about multi-million-dollar industries sitting right here in our backyard. We're simply not building the education and awareness around. So when you go into these communities, these folks they just don't know, they don't care. McDowell County is more of a senior community than anything. There are more senior citizens there than anything. A lot of these folks are raising young children because of drug-addicted parents. So it's a pretty bad situation with economic development, we decided now that we understand who we are, what we can be, what the potential is here, and of course we have challenges still. Infrastructure is a huge challenge. But even with that, when you go to places like McDowell County, West Virginia, you drive through the county and you'll see abandoned buildings, buildings collapsing everywhere. So you ask yourself, why can't these facilities be repurposed and used for something else? And when you talk to the county officials about these types of things, they blow you off. They care less. So we're still fighting those same struggles, especially when you have city officials and county officials that are still deeply connected to coal mining. So we've really crossed several hurdles. One of the things we've done is built a training and demonstration facility in McDowell County to actually demonstrate, okay, it's not enough for us to tell you, so let us put something in place so that you can actually come and see. We started some workforce development programming. And it's one of those, you can't just say, come and train and learn these things. We actually had to get grant funding so that we could pay these folks to come out and train. So as people start to come through our programming, you start to see the light pop on with these folks. Oh, I didn't know. So they put their hands on it. I didn't know that we could grow apples. You didn't know that we could grow apples in West Virginia. The Golden Delicious apple, I think, to my understanding, is native to West Virginia. So we've got peaches, pears, apples, cherries. There are plums, a wide variety of fruits. Berries grow, blackberries particularly, and raspberries grow here wild. You would not believe how much of this stuff just grows here in the wild. So we've kind of brought in other organizations that are serious about it. We've lost hope in certain organizations, but the USDA and the NRCS in particular, National Resource Conservation Service, which is really interested in preserving what we have and not taking the big ag approach to farming here, because when you look at the western part of the United States and what's going on now, everyone's talking about a drought. What they're not saying is what caused these problems. And a lot of what's caused these problems are big business, big ag in particular. I'm not a supporter of big business, period. Walmarts, in my opinion, are rural American killers. When I was growing up, coming through high school in Mercer County, Bluefield, I went to high school in Bluefield, there were locally owned grocery stores, auto mechanics, clothing boutiques. All of these things existed in a lot of these towns, even in McDowell County, until Walmart showed up. And when Walmart showed up, these places went away. And I mean quickly. But yet, we're still running to Walmart, and the folks in these communities don't understand that you're shooting yourself in the foot when you're running to Walmart, spending your dollars. None of that money is circulating within this community. It's all going to Arkansas, I guess. So really building education and awareness around these things, and what's gotten us to the point that we are now has kind of become our work, our life's work. And we're just now probably 10 or 11 years into this, really starting to gain attention, get people to start focusing on what's going on. A lot of folks don't like what we're doing down there, but it is what it is. I mentioned West Virginia University because West Virginia University has always been here in terms of recognition. Everybody, like I said, the flags are flying, but that's all related to football on Saturday. WVU should be, we need you to be so much more than just football on Saturday. And this is not a freebie. This is not give us anything, because we realize that this is a huge business as well, and it has to be sustained. We need it to be sustained. So there are ways that we feel that we can partner with universities and academia in general, and it be mutually beneficial, because if we don't have academia involved, it's not going to happen. In order to move agriculture forward, or any industry forward in our part of the country, you need investment. You need dollars flowing into these areas to make these things happen. And right now we don't have the research or the data to support it. And if you don't have data, you don't have investment. It's just what it is. So these are some of the things that we're working on now, is really trying to build partnerships. We've built a brand, Appalachian Gold. They did an amazing job with Mama's Meat Sauce last night. Thank you very much. And that was another opportunity. This sauce goes back generations, almost to the plantation in my family, and it was born out of struggle. And when Josh came up to Bluefield and we sat down and we talked, he was giving us ideas that we hadn't even thought of at the time as well. He said, I want to showcase what Appalachia is. This is a man in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. But he believed in us. He believed in Appalachia, and he wanted to come here and help us to move this thing forward. We met him through one of our partners, Together for Hope, who works in over 200 counties of persistent poverty across the country. So these people are very serious about addressing poor communities and the needs in these communities. So Josh came up, we sat down, he said, I want to tell the story of Appalachia. And I'm listening to this man talk story, and I'm thinking, and all I could think about was this sauce, because it was born out of struggle. You know, you couldn't run to the store to buy everything that you needed. You know, sometimes in order to preserve foods, the Black community didn't have certain access or the resources to get things. So they had to come up with ways, we had to come up with ways of preservation of our food and just simple ingredients that we may not have been able to afford. So my great-great-great-grandmother came up with the first version of this thing. And since then, my grandmothers and then my mom finally, you know, and they've all put their own spin on it. But that's what that was born out of. We're very proud of it. But there are millions of those types of stories throughout Appalachia, because that's not limited to the Black community. Some of my greatest friends are white, and we've had great experiences together. A good friend of mine, Brian Dash, we were playing Little League baseball after school. We had about 2 hours to kill. So he says, walk with me to my house and we'll get some cookies and milk and hang out. I said, okay. I wasn't going to my house because it was too far. So he lived close and I knew I had to walk. So definitely wasn't going home. We get to his house, his mom comes outside. He asks her for cookies and milk. She kind of looks kind of surprised. It's almost like one of those, guess who's coming to dinner moments. And we play basketball for a little while, shoot a couple hoops, and then we go back, play our game. I get to school the next day, and he wouldn't even look at me. And after school, I went up with, hey, what's going on? And they beat him black and blue for bringing me to his house. About a year ago, Brian shows up at my parents' house looking for me. At this point, he's addicted to methamphetamine, I believe. His whole life kind of derailed. And for some reason, he wanted to talk to me. And we sat on the porch and we talked about that story. And I didn't understand what was going on when we were children, because they basically told him, you can't deal with him anymore. So he came to my house, we sat down and talked, and he talked about his drug addiction problem. And all I could do was, you know, give advice to the extent that I could. I've never had that experience. I don't know what to tell you. But about a year later, he showed up at my house again. And when I walked to the door and I looked through the glass, I could look in his eyes and tell this is a different man from the guy that I saw a year ago. And the things that we were doing in McDowell County, the things that I said to him, he told me changed his life. He's now the owner of his own construction company in North Carolina, doing extremely well, and has informed me that anything that he can do to help our cause and to demonstrate to this community that there is hope. It meant the world to me, and these are the stories that we have to hold up in front of this community in order to get them to believe. So that told me, because when you're dealing with drug addiction, one of the things that we faced is you have to be very patient when you're talking about workforce training in a place like McDowell County. You can't just show up to work and think, okay, this is the way it's going to be. You show up to work or you don't. If you do, fine. If you don't, then we'll find someone else. Because that's the military and the DOD in me. In the world that I come from, again, there's zero margin for error, but the folks that we work with, you're going to have folks to show up to work. They may have been drunk the night before and you're smelling alcohol and they're still just not all the way there. We have folks that are active drug users right now. We know this, but we also have seen people in our programming that started off with a drug addiction issue, and by the time they get to month 4 or 5, they're coming to work and you can tell there's a change in this person because they're believing in what we're talking about. They actually see the potential. They see the opportunities that we have. Regardless of what everyone else has said to them or about them, we're providing hope for these folks, and it's actually working. If we make a difference with one person, then that's one person, that we've gotten off drugs, and I feel very proud about that. The folks that I work with, Miss Bandy and others, we've been doing this as volunteer work. It's not about money. It's not about grant funding. This is about caring about the community that we serve, caring about people. It doesn't matter what color you are, because again, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And if we're going to turn a blind eye on the deaf ear to the struggle of these people, there won't be a McDowell County very much longer. Who knows what it'll be? Now we know there are a lot of folks that are focused on our area. As much work as we've done over the last 10 or 11 years, we're just now getting to the point to where people are starting to realize the potential of the place. Unfortunately, the people that are realizing the potential are not the people that live there. Just like the Black community in times past, we all know about gentrification and some of the things that have happened in some of the inner cities across the United States. Now, rural gentrification is a very real thing. And there are corporations, there are people that have interests in this part of the country now because we have a lot going for us that we don't realize. We have more water than we know what to do with. We have potential to produce a lot of food. And when you talk about food production, COVID really exposed what the food system here in the United States really looks like. And the vast majority of what we eat is imported. And the quality of it is very poor. And some of the things that are being done to the food that we consume, most people you don't even want to know what's going on. So there are a lot of folks that understand in order for the United States to get itself in a position to produce food for itself, Appalachia has to become a major player in that discussion. And there is no reason why Appalachia should not be one of the leading food producers in this country, especially tree fruit, berries. You can go to the grocery store right now and buy a little clamshell of berries for $5 or $6. And that money's not coming into this community. So we're trying to inspire people in our communities to get engaged, figure out where you fit within this whole thing. Water is something that we're really focused on. Renewable energy is something that we're really focused on. There are a lot of things that we have to do to clean up the streams and the rivers across the state. There are people in McDowell County still straight piping waste into these streams. So we can't use it. At the same time, the water that the municipal water source, there are people that are getting parasites from this stuff. Certain parts of McDowell County have been under boil alerts for 11 to 12 years. But yet we've got fresh spring water running off these mountains, more of it than we know what to do with. So we're starting a watershed project as well, and this is working with conservation. Let's clean this up. Tourism is coming in big time. It's really growing. Most of the folks that are benefiting from tourism, however, are outsiders also. Folks come into McDowell County, and I know tourism statewide is a growing thing, but in McDowell County, there's no infrastructure in place to really support this. So when the folks come in, they're looking for food to eat, they're looking for accommodations, they're not there. So you've got folks on the outside taking advantage of that. Meanwhile, the folks in the community, they're left out. It's kind of like, if you don't have an economic base, you don't have anything. And when I was that 8-year-old kid asking my dad, why us? You know, how come we have to live the way that we do? And it's because integration took our economic base away from us. And everybody, when I was growing up, integration was supposed to be this great thing. Prior to integration, what did the Black community look like? When we talk about Black Wall Streets, and most people refer to Tulsa as Black Wall Street, but there were Black Wall Streets all over the United States. Harlem comes to mind, Tulsa, Rosewood. There are bunches of these places that were thriving across this country. And when integration happened, the economic base went away. So now we have to rebuild that economic base, not just for McDowell County, but there are counties throughout Appalachia that are in the same predicament. And one of the things that we would like to do is we would like to lead the charge. We would like to build a model and replicate that model throughout the country. Food deserts, it's not something that's going away. It's actually becoming more. We're getting more and more food deserts across this country. And we have the opportunity right here in West Virginia to build a model on how to move forward and replicate that in other places across the country. So when we talk about the benefit, you know, for a university like WVU, there is a great opportunity to be known for something other than football on Saturday. We could write the manual on how to go into impoverished communities, fix these problems. And you know, on Saturdays during the commercials, and they do the little thing on the university, wouldn't it be something if West Virginia University did something on fixing impoverished communities? It's desperately needed. It has to happen. We need you to step up and help us to fix these problems. We're not always talking about money. Social capital is just as valuable, because a lot of the problem in places like McDowell County is that we try to throw money at everything. And we think that money is the solution to everything, but all money does is create problems and greed and corruption. So we have to really sit down and figure out, what is it going to take? We need to talk about healthcare. When you look at the health statistics in these places, there are a handful of states in the United States that, since I can remember, have been at or near the top of the most unhealthy places in the world, not just in the country, because if you get outside the United States, you realize this is the most unhealthy country on the planet, bar none. Very easily. West Virginia, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, probably some that I'm missing, but we're always at or near the top of the list of most unhealthy places in the world. So how is this continuing to happen for decades? I mean, decades. I travel to Africa regularly, and the more I learn about Africa and places like Rwanda, for example, and I think everyone here, if you haven't seen the movie Hotel Rwanda, you should check it out, because it's not a completely accurate depiction of what took place, but it does tell the story of a genocide that took place. And in less than 40 years, Rwanda has managed to become the cleanest country in the world and one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And here we are in West Virginia, Appalachia, and not just Appalachia, but across the country. We're supposed to be in the most powerful nation on the planet, but yet we don't have the capacity to fix some of these issues. I was in Bosnia in the mid-90s, and that was one of the most life-changing experiences for me. To see a genocide firsthand, to see mass graves, to see the things that went on in this place. And there again, when you go and look, they're on their road to recovery. And you have to ask the question, what are we doing? here. How in the world are these places able to recover, and they get very serious about their citizens and fixing these problems? And here we are still, we're actually getting worse. We could continue to get worse. So again, it goes back to, is this intentional? Does anybody care what's going on? And again, I think that academia, where does community and academia collide? What is the role of academia in solving the problems in these communities? So there's a quote from Winston Churchill that says, "The price of greatness is responsibility." Who's responsible? I think for me, because people ask me, why are you doing this? If not me, then who? My view is, if not West Virginia University, then who? Our kids are suffering. They need help. We need help. And for me, I think that this organization has the potential, and again, it's a corporation, I get it. You know, it's not going to be this perfect scenario. There's corruption everywhere. And I would tell you, yes, WVU has been complicit in a lot of what's going on in these places, in my opinion. You're going into these communities, you're getting these grant funding, you're supposed to be making sure that things are fixed, or at least presenting solutions to some of these problems, but it's not happening. But yet, you've got the flags flying, you've got the ball caps, and you've got the t-shirts running around places like McDowell County. So if not you, then who? Education, I think, is the only way that we can do this sustainably. I think sustainability is critical. And for me, that's what our approach has been, is to actually show people, give them the hands-on experience of what it's like to actually do something that you can create a life for yourself with, because most of these folks don't think there's anything possible. So we're in the business of providing hope. We've got some excellent partners. We've created a brand, Appalachian Gold, and the reason that we named it Appalachian Gold is because we're literally sitting on a gold mine here. There are so many opportunities that exist here, not just agriculturally speaking. There are a lot of industries that could be thriving here. We also wanted to inspire other people. So we built this brand. We started Mama's Meat Sauce. We've got some other products coming, but a lot of the reasoning behind starting this brand was to show this community that these things can happen. It's possible. Because up to this point, folks didn't think that these things were possible. So now you've got folks in McDowell County talking about Appalachian Gold as if it's their own. So they've got some hope. My mother just was blown away with Mama's Meat Sauce. You know, can't believe this is happening. Well, it's happening, and we've got more to do. So now I've got folks calling me saying, well, if I produce this, can I put it on? Absolutely, that's what we created it for. Normally, producers in the agriculture business do about 10%. We've structured this organization in a way that we're not doing that to our farmers. Farmers are never taken care of. Big ag is the reason for that. So the way that we're modeling things gives us the opportunity to sustain what we're doing, because in order to sustain it, these farmers have to make a living, and they should make a great living. So a lot of what we're doing is just outreach. It's about educating. It's about bringing awareness to folks, and it's about giving folks hope. We tried to get into the school system down there, but everything is broken. I'm going to Tampa next week to talk at a summit related to hunger. And we wrote a summary. They asked me what the title is, and I said, the title of my presentation is going to be Hunger Games. Hunger Games, why Hunger Games? I said, because you people are playing games with people's lives. you write these farm bills and you do the farm to school and you give people in low income communities welfare and food stamps and all these types of things, and all that's doing is feeding the poor health that we're experiencing, because I can't afford on food stamps to go anywhere and buy anything that's good for me. I got to go and buy the most affordable food or food-like substances that I can find, because most of these low-income communities are living on processed garbage. So you're writing farm bills. Those farm bills don't apply to Appalachia. There's another game that you're playing, because we can't produce potatoes and tomatoes and those types. We can produce it, but we can't compete with Kansas. As a matter of fact, that's just not who we are agriculturally. So when you think about these farm bills and you put very little thought into these things, how about giving some consideration to what Appalachia could really contribute to this discussion and to the food system in this country, and then we may be able to do something. So there are a lot of games that are being played. There are a lot of organizations and people that are complicit in the demise of these communities. I'm all about bringing exposure to that, bringing solutions to it. And I think we're definitely pushing in the right direction. I've been extremely encouraged by the discussions that I've had here over the last couple of days. Surprised even, because it's been that difficult to find genuine people that really care, people that are really willing to roll their sleeves up. And again, it's not about money, it's just about finding solutions. Money is just one part of that. Social capital, I believe, is the most valuable asset that we can bring to the discussion. And I've been very encouraged by those discussions and the sincerity of the folks that we've been meeting with here. So with that, I will conclude my discussion here. I would be glad to answer any questions that anyone may have. My partner in crime is Miss Amelia Bandy. She's the Executive Director of Economic Development Greater East. None of this will be possible without her. I have to really give credit where credit is due. Dr. Crystal Cook Marshall, she's the person that kind of started this whole thing by going through McDowell County and doing the research in the coal fields, bringing awareness to this. Her father just passed away recently, so it's a very interesting time for us. I just had a granddaughter this morning. So we're really in a time of change. The organization is growing. We're getting a lot of exposure. We recently did a special with PBS that will air in February, I believe, and this is related to food security as well. So we're very eager to work with West Virginia University, the Eberly College. Dean, thank you very much, sir, for the discussion last night was great, and we're very encouraged with what we've heard here over the last couple of days. So any questions, please?
Questions online. You can take questions. Any questions from the audience?
Well, I'll just say that I would like to just put out there as this is not really a question. This is a placeholder for a conversation between you. That is, I think that when we look at universities, especially land-grant universities, right, the sort of sciencey part of it, over at the Ag School, Davis, and all that, that's an obvious sort of fit for these sorts of endeavors. But I would actually say that one of the things I think where a lot of community development efforts fall flat is not understanding social science. So if we look at vaccine rollouts and things like that, they do fail because of lack of hard science. They fail because they don't understand people very well. So I would just put forth that I think there should be a dialogue that I'm happy to spearhead with you about how we understand sort of the policy narratives in places like this. And understand how to intervene in those that doesn't change them to suit community needs rather than the needs of all the sort of outside forces that are involved.
Absolutely. I think land grants, during the time the land grants were established, and I just got an education on that recently, it was during a very interesting time. A lot of change was taking place. I think we're there again. So I think there's definitely, room, there needs to be room for discussion around land grant universities and how that can be applied now. Because when it was established, it was a very big time of change. And again, we're there now. So I think that land grant universities have to be at the forefront of this discussion and this fight. So I'm very eager to have those discussions. Yes, sir.
I'll just tag on that. First of all, thank you, Amelia, for being here and sharing this information with us. I think, as Sam just pointed out, there's a lot of resources within this college, a lot of perspectives, and a lot of opportunities for us to be informed by your experiences and the people at McDowell County. I would like to say that from our perspective, we see this as a potentially great partnership by which we can learn as much as we can get.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. It just makes sense. We are really interested in working with this organization because this is a pillar of our community. By default, this university is a leader in this state and in the region. And we're the Mountaineers, so it makes sense to me that when we talk about developing Appalachia, West Virginia University should be at the forefront in leading that charge. We should own that. Why not be first at something for a change? Because West Virginia is always looked down upon to begin with. And I think this presents an opportunity for us to really show who we are and what we're capable of in terms of economic development, dealing with impoverished communities, and empowering the people in those communities.
There's an online question. What roles or ideas do you have for the health-focused professions, like, but not limited to public health, can help contribute to the goals of sustainable farming, to contribute to economic viability of rural communities? I grew up in McDowell County, Virginia, right across the state line, and this is near and dear to me. Bree Shepherd is asking the question.
You want to take that?
First of all, hello, Bree. I'm from Tazewell County, Virginia, so that's. Did you hear me? For me, I think the role that I see health-focused professions in what we're doing is being able to create education and awareness around the full health spectrum. So why we're doing what we're doing as related to, population health, all the way down to like addressing hunger, knowing where your food is from, creating food producers, contributing to the food system, but just creating education around all of it, and education that the community can actually use that goes beyond, the non-education that they're getting in schools and the very limited education that people are getting when they go into doctor's offices and things like that. Just creating something that really shows people why this is important and what kind of outcomes, they can expect. In McDowell County, and I know it's the same in Buchanan County, Virginia too, we're always at the bottom of the list for health. And people need to understand why that is and how every decision that we make is kind of like, if you think about banking transactions, if you go through the drive-through at McDonald's, that's a debit to your health. If you have something healthy, that's a credit to your health. Why, how does that in the long run impact our overall health? So I think if we could create education around, the full system that people can really understand, especially in rural communities, and why we're in the shape we're in now. We know what the bad is, but how do we get to the good, and how do we create that education to show these people, and it's very much, inclusive of agriculture. So I don't know if that answers your question, but to me, it's more around creating the education. We've had some really bad experiences in getting our programming into the community. I was in a health center in McDowell County, and we were going to partner with them to do a pharmacy program. And the doctor told me basically that I was too late, that his population were 60-year-old community members, and I needed to basically just take my stuff somewhere else because the people's health was already decided. And for me, that's a problem because I have family members who are 60 years old and I don't feel like their life is over, and I feel like they deserve, time and attention. So just for me, the answer would be creating some sort of education, really even a campaign. We've talked about making spaces where people can see, healthy living in, beyond just an extension course or cooking class or whatever, but just showing people what that looks like and what the outcome to their life is.
I think in addition to that, on the state food and ag website, we're promoting pepperoni rolls. Chick-fil-A is now, they've got food trucks, Chick-fil-A food trucks now. So, and this is happening in some of the communities with the poorest health in the country, but yet we're allowing this to take place. Every time a new building goes up in our part of the state, it's a Hardee's, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, something that is continuing to kill the community, but yet it continues to happen. If you see a building being built in southern West Virginia, there's probably a pretty good chance that that's a fast food place. So we're talking out both sides of I don't understand how we can say in one breath, we have the worst health in the country, but allow these companies to continue to come into our communities and exploit the poor people. So I don't know how we address that particular problem, but it is a major problem for us. When you go to more urban areas or more populated areas, you have organizations like Whole Foods, and I don't think Whole Foods is perfect, but we need to start thinking along those lines ourselves, is how do we promote a healthy lifestyle? And it's, first of all, let's stop these fast food places from coming in here, because when you go to work in the morning in certain places, McDonald's, Burger King, Hart, all these places have cars wrapped around these places, and you see kids going into high school with their little McDonald's sack lunches these days. So we know that we have a critical problem, but these are the things that are going on. And I don't know how we resolve that. I'm not into politics. I guess it would start there, I'm not sure. But these are some of the things that we have to address. We can't continue to let these things happen in our communities.
Jared Bishop, originally from Mercer County, West Virginia, and having roots in McDowell County, he's really appreciative to your lecture and asks, do you believe there's a place for aquaculture in McDowell County? He also asks if you may share your contact information. We can do that privately too if you don't prefer to give your contact information.
Sure. No, I have no problem at all. You can email me at jaytartt@gmail.com, jaytartt@gmail.com. And absolutely, agriculture, I think agriculture makes a lot of sense for McDowell County. It makes a lot of sense for the region. We have great potential and definitely interested in talking to folks who want to get into the industry.
Any other? That's correct, right?
Yes.
It's AppalachianGold.com. It's like the website of that information. Like, is there a website for Appalachian?
Yes, as far as the Appalachian Gold information, that is AppalachianGold.com. We're really excited about the brand, and really showcasing what we can do in terms of development of products here in the region. Getting a lot of interest. We're hoping at some point next year that we will add honey to things that we offer. So we're being pushed quite a bit to get the honey off the ground. So that's coming very soon. we're very excited about the honey.
Is it gonna be flavored too? Or spicy, maybe?
Well, we actually had some folks in North Carolina that asked for a few samples, so we sent some samples of spicy honey down. We mixed the Wahilia pepper with the honey. They came back and said it wasn't spicy enough. They liked it, but they wanted a little more heat on it. So
Spicy enough for West Virginia folks, maybe, because you know.
yeah. But yeah, lots of potential for value added, value chain creation is something that we're really excited about as well. I think that places like McDowell present a lot of great opportunities for value chain creation, again, because the infrastructure is there. It just needs to be repurposed. There are a lot of towns throughout McDowell County that are willing to do business, to work with us. Kimball, West Virginia right now is one of the towns that are really excited about working with us there. So Appalachian Gold, look for us, please.
Any other questions from the audience?
I was about to say, out of curiosity, I currently work with the Prince of Deckers Creek nonprofit here that cleans up the Deckers Creek watershed. You talked about essentially bacteriological contamination in the water. Just because those 4 counties, well, especially McDowell County was a big coal town, how about A and D? And does that ever affect your farm? Or are you guys located in the upper part of that watershed below the coal mining, essentially?
Well, the good thing is the folks from conservation are testing this water constantly. So, I'm not well versed in, what's going on with the water, but they do come around, they test it. I'm told that the water in my area is in pretty good shape. I guess they base it off of a lot of the insects that are around the area. So some of the testing that they've done, we're in pretty good shape, but we do have a problem with, people still straight piping and doing those types of things in these streams. So that's kind of our priority now. Even watershed, that's a nonprofit situation as well. So we can go in and help with septic systems, rebuilding those. There's a lot of money that we could get access to go in and clean some of this up. And we're very hopeful because the tourism sector is begging for it in McDowell County right now. I've always wanted to get on a raft or something and, take off. But people are getting parasites and there's too much going on to be messing with that water at this point. But I am optimistic about the water and
conservation has done a great job. EPA, they're always out taking a look at things and holding these coal mines accountable. There's a coal mine several miles from where my farm is, but so far we haven't had any contamination issues due to coal mine. Yeah.
I guess also in my organization, I know our executive director is really talking about that infrastructure bill. I know that, that has a lot of impact for nonprofits, but I guess does that, excluding that you're obviously not a nonprofit, but is that something that could benefit you all or anything to look into, or is that just outside, I guess, a business standpoint?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I'd like to know more about it, but.
Yeah, so I know they keep saying like the money is about to come out, but we still haven't received it. But I was wondering if I'm a Vista, I'm not like high up, so I'm just now like learning about these things. But I was wondering if that does include more than just nonprofits and other stuff, and more local small businesses could ever, especially in agricultural senses and conservation senses.
Edge is a nonprofit, so that would be something that could benefit Edge, and then we're working to create a watershed group in McDowell County. There's already one that's kind of in a neighboring area, but we're working to do that and working to understand what resources are there to kind of improve that quality, whether it's going to be something that we're working on towards outdoor rec or just water quality in general. So I think we need to hear more about that.
Any other questions?
A very important question, and that's what's your favorite way to use Mama's Meats?
Wow. Any type of meat, obviously. I mean, it goes well on any meat. For me, honestly, chicken. Yeah, chicken.
Got like 4 bottles. Ready.
Oxtails.
Cocktails, yeah.
You know, Josh made a salad dressing out of it. We had, when folks from PBS came out to do the filming, they made a salad dressing out of it. That was very good. You know, kind of, again, I'm seeing things being done with this stuff that we had no idea. My mom saw it being used as a salad dressing. She said, "What is? Try it." She loved it. So I guess it's a little bit more versatile than I thought it would be.
Now we're getting all over you, we're excited about food and drinks.
All right, thank you so much.